It was supposed to be an incredible all-star race, short track racing at Bristol on a Wednesday night for $1 million. And instead, basically everything about the race was just wrong. Like, everything they did for the race was just wrong. There were some things that came out of this that is a good stepping stone. There were other things that came out where it's just like, do we really want that for the future? And is that really the best we could have done? So, All-Star Race at Bristol. In the All-Star Open, there wasn't really much action. Stage 1 definitely had the most action with Bubba and McDowell getting into it. But otherwise, if you were the race leader, you basically pulled away and didn't have a challenge. There weren't really many battles during the All-Star Open. And then we got to the All-Star Race, which was a little bit worse than the Open, but not much different. Different drivers had their turn at the lead at some points, like Blaney and Chase and Brad, but it was just hard to pass because there weren't multiple grooves until, there wasn't even multiple grooves at the end of the race, at the end of 150 or 40 laps or whatever. Which was a shame, but that's kind of what's going to happen when you don't run laps on a track with PJ1, on the track. That's just not how it works. So, where to start with this? NASCAR instituted a lot of changes for this All-Star race. Normally, the All-Star race is held at the very mellow and tame and dull Charlotte Motor Speedway, which, to be honest, I guess 2019's All-Star race was kind of good because it had a fight and all that, but 2018's was only special because they had plates on the cars, and even then, Kevin dominated the race and led a lot of laps and pulled away, and it was just on throttle all the time. 2017 wasn't really great. 2016 was a gimmick and a half. 2015 is not really memorable. 2014 is kind of memorable. Charlotte really hasn't produced much greatness for the All-Star race in the past. And it probably wouldn't have been much better than this, if any better. It probably would have been worse than what we saw at Bristol if it was at Charlotte, because we remember how the 600 and the one after that went. The starts of those races were tremendously bad because the PJ1 had to be worked in and such like that. So, this racetrack is normally one groove. Obviously, the old Bristol is single file around the bottom, and to get people out of the way, you'd have to root them up out of the groove. Then they added progressive banking to the racetrack, which made it slightly multi-groove. It kind of made the outside a little bit kind of viable, and then the outside became definitely the strongest. And then they started to grind the outside groove, which sometimes made it better and sometimes made it worse. And then we got to a point where basically the outside was so dominant that you could not do anything on the inside at all, and it was just single file around the top. Then they introduced PJ1 into the track, which was an instant success. The PJ1 created multi-grooves that made the inside just as good as the outside, and created side-by-side battles with a bunch of switching and swapping and stuff. So that was, it's a lot of fun with PJ1, and obviously with 40 race cars around this half mile, you're going to catch lap traffic. Lap traffic is going to get into the way, and it's going to create some balance because of that, because leaders are going to get slowed by lap traffic. So then we get to this race. PJ1 around the bottom, nothing on the top, and the PJ1 works in so well where it never goes away, and the outside never comes in because there were no series to get the outside worked in. So the outside was dirty at the start of the race, and they couldn't get it worked in time, so it was just single file around the bottom. Remember when everyone goes, we want old Bristol back. You got old Bristol back, and it was horrible. So stop wanting old Bristol back. You guys are idiots. We just had old Bristol, and everyone hated it. So, go look at Gluck's poll whenever he does it, probably tomorrow night, or tomorrow morning, right? Go look at it. We'll be lucky if it's at 50%, right? Maybe it'll be at 60% because Chase won. Maybe it'll be at 70% because Chase won. But it'll probably be the worst rated Bristol race since Kyle Busch won in 2017, okay? So maybe take a hint that multi-groove Bristol is the better Bristol than single file around the bottom Bristol. That's just, on a tangent there, a little bit off track. But, it's true. That's That's what it is. I mean, single file around the bottom. Bristol, we just saw it was bad Bristol. Especially with these cars, with Gen 6 cars. So NASCAR really royally screwed that up and made the inside so strong that the outside was just not a viable option at all during the race. I mean, at some points Brad could kind of make it work, but it was like a 50-50 chance he'd go up there and get really loose because there's no grip, or go up there and maybe keep his spot. So that was bad. That was a terrible aspect of it. NASCAR also announced that they would be changing the number placement for the cars on the doors for these all-star cars. Basically moving the numbers back to just in front of the rear wheel, giving some more room apparently for sponsors in front of the number to put sponsorship there and on the back quarter panel. So honestly, number placement is not something that I get furious about. Like, there are some people that will die on that hill of the number should be in the center of the car, and you know what? That's fine, because I agree the number should be in the center of the car. I wholeheartedly agree with that. But when you're watching a sport, right, and there's so many things to disagree with, normally you die on the hill of one thing, right? Like, you can only be on one hill. You can't be on multiple hills and die on multiple hills. You can only die once, so you have to pick the hill you want to die on. The hill I will die on is low downforce at every racetrack, like 3.5-inch spoilers. Like, just give me that. Just give me 3.5-inch spoilers. That's all I want. And some more horsepower. And then, that's the hill I'm going to die on. I will not die on a hill that number should be placed in the center of the race car. The only hill I will maybe die on that is if it's between numbers in the center of the race car and numbers on the windows. I hate numbers on those rear windows or like on the side windows where they're really, really small. That's just absolutely ridiculous. So I'd maybe change hills for that. But otherwise, if they were to move it back to just in front of that rear wheel, I wouldn't be mad. It wouldn't make me stop watching. It wouldn't make me, it wouldn't change any opinion I have about NASCAR. I would just be like, they moved it back, whatever. If it works for sponsors, that's cool, I guess. Like, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'm not gonna be mad about it because the number doesn't really affect the racing at all. So, I mean, other people think differently, and that's fine. Because once again, as I said, I agree with the number being in the center of the door and not anywhere else. So, I mean, we think the same way. It's just I'm not as passionate as some people are. It's just like the same people that maybe think low downforce is better than high downforce, but they're not as passionate about it as I am. So obviously they won't die on that hill for that. They'll die on some other hill. But that's just how it is. Another thing NASCAR introduced, which was a little strange, was Underglow. Basically, they wanted Underglow and colors for each manufacturer. So Toyota was red, Ford was blue, and Chevy was amber. And let me tell you, I don't know why. Like, I understand why they did it, right? It is obviously to create manufacturer brand, recreate that, because it used to be like manufacturer against manufacturer, and now it's not really about that anymore. You don't really see like someone go and be like, oh, we beat those Fords, or we beat the bow ties, or we beat the Toyotas. You don't really see that anymore in NASCAR, and the cars look pretty similar to each other, where it's like you don't really know just by glancing at the side of the car if it's a Ford or a Chevy or a Toyota. You have to see the front of the car to make that, to make that appearance. So NASCAR wanted to do that with this Underglow to basically create a distinction between the manufacturers and whatnot. It's not something I like, I'll be honest. I just think it's kind of stupid. It's kind of worthless. You don't need it. I mean, it's just not really anything special. It's not anything cool. I mean, I don't know. I saw like tweets about people saying like, oh, well, my kids weren't racing fans, but they saw lights on their cars, so they got very interested, and now they're interested. Now, here's the thing about that, right? People may be like, well, look at that. It's getting kids, new fans. We need kids as new fans. Right. So what happened the last time NASCAR chased fans that weren't their demographic, right? What happened the last time NASCAR did that? Remember in 2005, NASCAR was like peak TV viewership and peak attendance at tracks, right? Remember that when like a Daytona 500 would grab like so many viewers that like it could contend with the Super Bowl, right? Remember that? and then it dropped off because NASCAR wasn't cool anymore, because it wasn't because of the changes they made, just NASCAR wasn't cool anymore. It didn't fit in with the demographic anymore. They chased those fans then. As they started losing fans, they started making changes to the point system, started making changes to the cars, started doing this and that. They were chasing fans that weren't there, right? And what did they get out of that? They alienated some of their fans, some of their hardcore, true fans that then left because of that. And then the fans that they were chasing left because those fans aren't interested with NASCAR. They're just interested with the gimmick in NASCAR. Basically what I'm saying is if you watch NASCAR because they have lights under the car, you're not watching NASCAR for the racing, you're watching NASCAR for the lights. Alright? And you're not going to stay watching NASCAR for the lights, considering not every race is a night race. So if you have Underglow during the day, that doesn't really work that well. So honestly, the Underglow is just kind of a failed experiment, especially with it only being in the back. Kevin Harvick commented. He said, "I wished it would have fallen off during the race." And I think he said something like, "Only my 8-year-old liked it," so he wasn't too ecstatic. In fact, Kevin Harvick has been the most outspoken after the race in a series of tweets. He called out NASCAR for basically not cleaning the upper groove, saying that if they had the other lower series race before, it maybe would have created a better race. He then said people were surprised the bump and run didn't work, but he said with it being just single file around the bottom and there was so much grip, it was so grip dependent that the cars then became aero dependent and you couldn't get to the bumper anyway, so it didn't really matter. So he's a little mad about that. He said, but it was probably a good race because a fan favorite won, which he's not wrong about. Everything he said was basically on spot. Maybe the one thing that worked out for this all-star race was the choose rule. There weren't many chances to try it out, so I'd love to see it, for an actual race, but don't make the change during 2020. Maybe make it after the season, and maybe say for 2021 we'll have a choose rule. But if you don't know what the choose rule is, it's basically put some marker on the racetrack, and at that marker, you line up for the restart. You either pick the top groove or the bottom groove, because obviously NASCAR wants double file restarts because they're exciting. In fact, double file restarts could be considered a gimmick if you really think about it, considering you're putting someone into a groove they don't want to be in, right? With single file, everyone was on the same groove, everyone was at an equal playing ground on the lead lap. And then you got double file restarts, and depending on where you came out of pit road was where you restarted. And then the later we got to double file restarts, the more people started trying to manipulate which lane they were in on restarts by slamming on brakes. I watched today the 2015 Martinsville race, and Denny Hamlin, I think, brake checked at the end of the pit road, I think at least 4 times, maybe 5. That's basically what the drivers were doing. They were, slamming on brakes, trying to get into a better position. So that's just kind of how it was. So NASCAR decided to try and change that and make it so that you wouldn't have to slam on brakes at the end of pit road. You could choose your own lane. You would be in control of your own destiny then, which I like. There weren't many chances to see it in practice, but I liked it, and it was interesting. And I think it would work out. It didn't impact the race at all. It didn't change anything about the race. It felt normal. I do wish TV would have shown the lane choices though, because they showed it like twice during the open and never again. So show that. That's an important part of the race. You have to show that. It's like showing pit stops. You should show that. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if there's really much else to talk about. There wasn't much that happened except Bubba and McDowell kind of have a feud now, with McDowell wrecking Bubba, which looked to be on purpose. He turned left down the straightaway. But I mean, I think that's really it. Chase Elliott won. I think I really covered everything. I guess what this shows is that sometimes there are some racetracks that need other factors to make a good race. For example, I've said this about super speedways for a long time. Super speedways, Daytona and Talladega is what I'm talking about, right? This is a very unpopular opinion, and this is a very big hot take, but they are not good racetracks. Because if you were to put 2 race cars out at Daytona and Talladega, right? Just 2 race cars of equal race cars. And you were to set them out, and they have plates on the cars, or I guess tapered spacers, which we have now. if you were to put them out there, 2 cars, you would not have a good race because the second car would need help to pass the first, and it just wouldn't work out. It just wouldn't work out at all. If there is a track where you need more than like 5 cars to have a good race, and if pit strategy is ever mentioned, and you go, ugh, that's bad because strategy is a part of racing, and it's just kind of like, and you need to slow the cars down to make them safe. I mean, that's kind of when it's like, this track is borderline bad. For Bristol, right, you could bring 2 cars there and sometimes have a good race. It just depends on how the track is at that point. If there were multiple grooves, you could probably see 2 cars have a good race. But otherwise, you need lap traffic to come into play, so you need 40 cars on there to have a good race on normal standards. So it was just, I think it just showed that Bristol can be pretty bad. Depending on the circumstances. Maybe if they want to try an all-star race somewhere else, Martinsville could be a chance. I don't really know many places that could hold a great all-star race, if I'm being perfectly honest. I mean, non-points races in NASCAR are kind of just like, I don't know, they're losing their luster. I just don't, they just aren't, they aren't special anymore. The Clash isn't really that special, All-Star race isn't really that special anymore. Sure, you win $1 million, but it's just like not much happens during them anymore. It's just kind of like bland and stale. And since there's not that many cars out there, there's not many game changers, and it's always the best cars, and it seems like the best cars are always out in front. I mean, I just don't remember the last non-points race I thoroughly enjoyed, like, all race long. Like, sure, last year's All-Star race was deemed as good, but, like, I don't remember much happening during, like, the earlier portions of that race. Another thing I need to add, if you're going to have stages during an All-Star race, you need to make the stages worth something. Because all stages do, right, is make people ride around just waiting for the caution to come out. Like, even, like, I am pro stages. I have said, like, I would rather stages over random debris cautions at, like, 5 laps to go or something. And it's just kind of like, okay, so if you're give something for stages, because even when you're giving something for stages, people still ride around. If it is a difference between 6th and 7th, the driver in 7th is not going to push it on the driver in 6th because he knows the yellow's coming out, right? If you're back in 15th, you're not pushing it because all you know is as long as you stay on the lead lap, you're getting a yellow flag. You know there's going to be a yellow, so people don't push as hard. That's something I really kind of focused on when going back through that journey from 2011 on up. So far, every race I've watched has been without stages. So yellows are coming out at random points. You don't know when the next one's going to be. It could be in 10 laps. It could be in 50 laps. It could be in 100 laps. It could be never. That could have been the final yellow that just happened right there, right? So you're always on go mode because you're like, I can't lose too much time because I might not have a shot to get it back. So when you have stages during an all-star race, and obviously all-star races don't give out points, so you have to have the all-star race stages mean something. You can't just be like, oh, it's just a caution flag, because then people are going to know, okay, I'm getting a yellow in 15 laps. I'm just going to ride around here in 13th, or I'm going to ride around here in 8th, or I'm going to ride in 4th, because I don't need to push it. I don't need to get into a better position. I don't need this. I don't need that. I don't need to win the stage, because the stage means nothing, unless you're going to give out money for stages, or you're going to give out some positions, or make like the finish in the stages mean something. They used to do that, I think it was like 2015 or so. They set up the starting lineup for the last stage based by average finish in the other, like the first 3 stages or something. In some all-star races, if you won stage 1, you started on pole for the final stage. If you won stage 2, you started on 2nd. Stage 3, you started 3rd. Stage 4, you started 4th. So that's just, that something like that. You need to do something to give some incentive to do well during the stages. You can't just be like, stages are just yellow flags. You need to give some money bonus, and it has to be a lot of money, or a good amount of money at least. Or you have to give out like some incentive for later in the race or something for this. Like, it can't just be a yellow flag. That's just not how it works, especially with an all-star race. Like, I get it, during real races you at least get points for it, and that's some sort of incentive to do well during the stages and get up inside the top 10. But otherwise, if you're back in 20th and you know you're not getting inside the top 10, you're just riding around waiting for the next yellow, trying not to crash someone else, and just trying to stay on the lead lap and running a good enough pace to do that. So that's kind of where stages have kind of hurt races, but like especially the all-star race, make the stages worth something. They have to have some sort of incentive behind them. So that's another thing NASCAR messed up. They messed up a lot of things. The number placement, just the whole thing about the track was bad. I mean, there was no practice beforehand. There was no races beforehand. The PJ1 on the bottom was too OP, so it just kind of ruined everything. The Underglow was bad. The whole like format was bad. I think the only thing that was good was the choose rule, and that was because it didn't really do anything. It didn't have an impact on the race at all. So that is it, I believe. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you guys for the next one.